Okay, we're recording. So, glossary module, 10 ways to make this old dog do new tricks. If we've not met before, my name is Michelle Moore, and I'm the Chief Evangelist for Remote Learner. I've been Moodling now for about 9 years, been working for Remote Learner for about 7. The better part of those years I've spent traveling and training teachers and business trainers and anyone and everyone on no problem anyone and everyone on how to use Moodle, and learning a lot along the way. So we'll start out with why I love the glossary, why it is my most favorite module. First of all, it just has so many features. You know, I start listing the features and it feels like I'm going on and on and on, and I think of, oh wait, oh, I forgot to mention that it also does this, and it does this, and it does this. It just has so many features, and all of those features make it so flexible. It's one of the reasons it's my go-to tool, because of all of the features. So it gives it many, many possible applications. As I said before, there are just tons of ways that you can use the glossary module for more than just glossaries. I like it because it does allow for collaborative content generation, meaning I can let my learners contribute. As I was creating sample glossaries for this session, I was remembering why, you know, I let my students build the glossaries, not because they're hard, but, you know, who wants to build all those glossary entries? It's such a good experience for the learners to do that. And the glossary is just a really nice, easy way to let the learners create content together, let them share content, let them share information, and not put it, you know, behind this wall. And then it also allows for just-in-time learning opportunities. With the glossary and the functionality we'll talk about, there are lots of ways that I can present the information or present information to learners just at the time they need it. So I am not familiar with the term, I can have it right there for them. I need a review of a process or procedure, I can put it right there, right when they need it. And there aren't many opportunities to do that. So the glossary is nice for that reason. Let's do a quick review of functionality. And if you were in my session on Friday, this part may be a bit of a review. But I think it's worth talking about what sort of features we're talking about here, and what will enable or make it possible for you to do all of the things that we're talking about. So first of all, glossary can be used as a dictionary. That would be the simplest, most straightforward, most obvious application, is that you can use the glossary to collect terminology, vocabulary, terms and definitions. With that, though, the glossary is not limited to just plain text. You can incorporate audio, video, images, links, attachments, all sorts of things inside of that content. So you can create this glossary. It's useful that way. It gives the learners a go-to place to find terminology. But you can also use the glossary as a resource collection. So really, anytime I have a collection of stuff, the glossary is where I start to think about putting that. Depends on what I want to do with it. The database is also a really nice tool for collecting stuff, but the glossary is just really easy to set up and really easy to get going. So I use the glossary quite often for collecting resources because of some of the features that I'm about to talk about. So one of the first and the killer feature in the glossary is that it does this auto-linking thing. And we talked about this a bit the other day. What auto-linking does for you is it's set up so that anytime you use a word in your course that's included in the glossary, it automatically links to that. So if I have, well, in this example here, I have the word chat in my glossary, and a student used the word chat in a discussion forum post. And because that word is in the glossary, it automatically links to that entry, and then the students have that definition right there when they want it, when they need it. So the auto-linking is just tremendous. And this is just the simplest, most straightforward example or way to use the auto-linking. But that's one of the features. The glossary also allows you to print with a click. So one click, I can print the entire glossary for those learners that like to have stuff on paper. I can also allow learner contributions, which I was referring to earlier. I don't think I've built my own glossary. I'm trying to think if ever. Probably just for samples, really. But more often than not, I create glossary shells and then allow the learners to contribute to the glossary, let them do the learning, and then I support, facilitate, and adjust. So ratings and comments. You can also allow learners to rate each other's glossary entries. So you're asking the learner not only to make their own contribution to the glossary, but to look critically at what the other learners have done and give it a rating. Now, just like discussion forums and any other place in Moodle that allows for ratings, you can use a numerical rating scale. You can also create your own qualitative scale. So you can say things like, this is the best explanation I've ever seen. You rock, this is a great idea. I think you haven't been here, or paying attention. Whatever you want those glossary entries or those ratings to say, you can do that, and it allows the learners to engage and participate without having to go all the way to making a comment. You can also connect to your glossary what's called a random glossary entry block. Now, realize that even though it says it's random, it doesn't have to be. So there's some neat tricks that you can do with the random glossary entry block with that functionality. What the random glossary entry block does is it connects a block on your course page to a glossary in your course. So you can pick and choose, and you can have multiple random glossary entry blocks. And then you can say, I want entries pulled from this glossary, and I want those entries to change every time the page reloads, or I want them to change every 2 days or every 7 days. Totally up to you, but it allows you to put the information from the glossary right in front of the students, catching them when they come into the course. So even though the learner may not go into the glossary, they may not take the time to make their way there, you can still get their attention this way. Everything in the glossary can be categorized. I don't know if categorizable is a real word, but I'm saying it is. I can create categories and organize the content in my glossary. So learners can browse through the entire contents of the glossary. They can browse by category. Then they also have the ability to search the glossary. So a number of different ways to access the information. I can search the full text of any entry in the glossary. I can search the keywords, it searches the concept, the full definition, everything. I can also sort or search by alphabet, date. I can sort by author, see who made that contribution. And then there's the keyword functionality. And the keyword functionality also works with the auto-linking, by the way. So if you want the keywords to be auto-linked so that the learner can get to the term from alternative phrases, then you can do that. Other options, other features that you have with the glossary, as I said, the list just goes on and on. You can set up the glossary so that duplicate entries are allowed. So a neat idea here, if you allow learners to make contributions to the glossary, then you can allow duplicate entries. You could then use the ratings feature to have the students vote on those entries. And then the glossary entry with the highest ratings is then kept, and the other glossary entries are deleted or removed. So you make a little competition, which drives interest for students, creates a little motivation. You can also do global glossaries. A global glossary is a glossary that's created at the site level, and all the words in the global glossary are linked or auto-linked as they're used all the way across the site. Now, there are really, truly very few applications where this makes a lot of sense because, there are very few organizations where there's one set of terminology that applies across all of their courses. But if I am, let's say I'm working with nursing students, I might have a glossary that has nursing terminology, and that might make sense as a global glossary. So it's there as a resource always to come back to. There are also resources, some of these different glossary examples we'll talk about here in a minute that might also make sense as a global glossary. Realize that is something that has to be set up by the Moodle admin. The shell has to be set up by the Moodle admin. So that does limit instructors sometimes. You can also do main or what I call master course glossaries. So when you create a glossary, you have the choice to decide whether or not the learners can contribute to the glossary or if it's a glossary that's only available to be controlled or managed by the instructor. The idea behind the main glossary is that you would take, you can add your own entries as the instructor, but you can also then add entries directly from the secondary glossaries just by clicking a little plus sign. So I can go to the secondary glossaries once a main glossary is built in your course, and I can say, yeah, that's a really good definition. We want to move that to the main glossary. So this is another way to motivate students, is to say, this definition is so good, we need to preserve it for posterity, and we're going to move it into that main or that master glossary, the best of glossary that's in the course. So FAQ format. There is also another option when you're setting up the glossary to have the glossary display as an FAQ. This is really useful if you're creating FAQs for your courses or have thought, I need an FAQ for my course. You still have all of that other functionality that you can allow the learners to make contributions. You can approve their entries before they're published. You can let learners rate those entries, so you can get all kinds of feedback on the FAQs that you've created. And it's really easy to update. If I create a web page full of FAQs, then I have to manage and format that page. And as I change things, I have to move things around, adjust the layout. When I do a glossary as an FAQ or an FAQ as a glossary, I just click the delete button and everything reshuffles and it works itself out. No big deal. You can also choose the encyclopedia format, which allows the learner or the author's name to appear with the glossary entry. It allows the images and things that you would add to that glossary entry to appear in line. So it creates a nice encyclopedia-like layout. So when you're doing more comprehensive glossary entries, you can do that. And then some of you may be aware, but there's a Games module plugin. I think we talked about this a little bit the other day. Games module plugin that works with the glossary that allow you to create like hangman games from the terms in your glossary. You can also do, let me see, here in the US we call it Chutes and Ladders. In the UK I learned they call it Snakes and something. Snakes and Ladders, Snakes and Chutes, I don't know. Anyway, but you can create those sorts of games. Thanks, Snakes and Ladders. So Snakes and Ladders or Chutes and Ladders kinds of games from the glossary entries and several others as well. Crosswords, thank you, yes. So a number of options there to help you further leverage the entries in your glossary. So let's go ahead and take a minute then, and we're going to look through 10 different examples or ideas for using the glossary within your own courses. And there are variations on all of these, and if you've done something similar and you want to comment on that and share that, go ahead and do that. If you'd like to see some of these things in action, I do have examples or resources related to most of these ideas in the session course. So I tried to outline the key features that you need to set up this sort of glossary and then also create that sample so you can kind of visualize it. Different games. Crosswords makes more sense, yes. Yeah, crosswords with glossary terms are awesome. So the first example I have for you, and we're going to start probably with some of the more mundane examples, things that you may have already seen or thought of, and then hopefully get to a few that are a little more interesting. I will say that some of these ideas, yes, I did come up with on my own, but there are quite a few of them that I found. There are a number of resources out there, a lot of people talking about the glossary and creative uses. If you're looking for ideas, if you're looking for different examples, William Rice has a couple of books. His Moodle Teaching Techniques book had some examples of creative glossary uses. Mary Cooch and her book, the Moodle for 7 to 14-year-olds, has neat ideas. There's a page in the Moodle docs. I've got a link to that in my session course. And then the Using Moodle book by Jason Cole and Helen Foster also had a couple ideas for the glossary. And then there's discussion forums at moodle.org. There's information all over the place. I've tried to compile as much of that as possible for you, but and to make sure to give credit for the ideas where I can. So the first idea on my list is to give credit for word use, and this actually comes from the Moodle docs. I think it's a clever idea. So we think about the glossary. Your glossary is set up to contain vocabulary or terminology that you ideally would like your learners to use. The challenge with new vocabulary is, it takes a little bit of time before you feel comfortable using it, and sometimes you just revert back to terms that you're familiar with and you avoid using that terminology because you're afraid that you're using it incorrectly. So as an instructor, to encourage that, you set up your glossary, you have your learners create the glossary, you have the auto-linking turned on. With that auto-linking turned on, what's going to happen is anytime the learners write one of the terms from the glossary, it's going to be highlighted. It's going to be very visible. So you as the instructor are not going to spend hours on end searching through the forum posts and the wiki entries and blog posts and all of that, trying to look for the proper vocabulary. It's highlighted and makes it easy to find. And you could narrow it down to, I'm going to look for it in discussion forums, or as I grade discussion forums, I'm going to be looking for this. So I turn on auto linking, so I make sure I have that functionality. The terms are highlighted, and then as the instructor, you give credit for correct term usage. And as the example in the Moodle docs suggested, you could go 2 levels here if you'd like. You could give 1 point for using the word at all, for making an effort, and 2 points for using the word correctly. And I always come back to how can I get the students to do the work. So always thinking about ways that you could have the learners look for these terms, or look for these terms in each other's forum posts. And since I let students grade each other's forum posts, I could just add that as a criteria. You could also use a workshop or use some other activities to have the learners, responsible for monitoring each other. Another idea here at the Montana Moot last year, I remember an instructor talking about, rather than the instructor trying to give participation grades for students and trying to keep track of who talked how many times and what they said, all of that, he paired students and said, okay, you're responsible for monitoring their participation, you're responsible for monitoring their participation, or randomly assigned. And then at certain periods you would submit a participation report for the person you were monitoring, and he took care of it all that way. You could do the same sort of thing with this. Is you could say, okay, your job is to watch for how many times they use this, and then you as the instructor don't have to spend time wandering through the forums just looking for those highlighted words. Has anybody done this? The credit for word use idea? They've all walked away. No. Okay, I think it's a clever idea. I think it really is a neat way to get learners to use the words that you're wanting them to use. To expand their vocabulary. Lots of ways you could do this. Yeah, I wish I could take credit for it, but I do think it's a good idea. Second idea then, student of the week. So in this example, what I would do is I create a glossary. Each glossary entry has a student bio. Ideally, I would ask the students to create those glossary entries. So maybe at the start of the class, start of the course, I ask the learners to go in, add an entry to the glossary. They put their picture in there. I could have them record an audio clip, have a little message, talk a little bit about their interests, something that it might not put in their profile. Maybe something that's specific to the course. So we don't want to duplicate exactly what's in their profile, because then, what's the point? So I try to vary it just a little bit. Ask the learners to make those contributions. And then I set up a random glossary entry block, set it up to be random so we never know who's going to pop up on the next week, and then set it to every 7 days. So every 7 days a student pops up. And Dana, you'll have to tell me, but in my experience, students will come to the course just to see, if their name's there. Is it their week? And this works with learners of all ages, really. Good opportunity to reinforce e-safety. That's true. That's true, and it's a nice way to have a conversation about different environments. Moodle is a closed down, protected environment. What should go here? What's okay to do here? Yeah. Oh, they wanted a criteria, not just random. Oh, so they wanted to know. Oh, got it. Got it. I've seen this idea. What you're talking about. So you went through and you picked somebody to be the student of the week, and you were designated them that way. Is that what you're saying, Dana? Oh, okay. You did got it. Got it. So there are a couple of different ways to do this. In this case, this would be geared towards building community, right? With the whole randomness thing, get to know your fellow classmates. Because I know in my own courses and when I taught in the classroom, even you'd have students who'd sit side by side and still by the end of the year not know the name of the person sitting next to them, and that can be even more difficult in an online course if they don't see each other at all. So the student of the week gives you a way to get to know the other people in your course, and with it being random. So yeah, I don't want to spend time voting and creating a way to choose. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So variations on this idea, and then I'll talk a little bit about a variation on, I think, what Dana's talking about here. Variations, you could do an employee of the week, and it's still, again, just random, and it's a way to connect the people in the workplace together, to get to know each other, because it really does make a difference. You know, if nobody notices you're gone or you don't know the guy sitting next to you, then you feel your connection to the workplace is a little bit different. A.T. Wyatt had an example. She posted in the Moodle forums that Jason and Helen quoted in their book. It was to do bios of people related to the field of study. So I taught middle school math. I would have bios, and I wouldn't create these. I'd have my students create these. Write bios of famous mathematicians, put those in a glossary, and then every week I'd put up a new famous mathematician. So you could also do this for a new employee orientation. When you're training new employees, you want those new employees to know who certain people are. You know, you want them to know who the CEO is, and you know, who the VPs are, or the superintendent and the principals. And you know, you can show them pictures or introduce them once, but you know, when they're walking down the hall in the next week and they're still glazed over, it'd be nice for them to recognize those names and faces so they can, you know, say hi and stand at attention or whatever it is they need to do. You put these bios in a glossary and have these key faces pop up every day. Then again, they're right there in front of them, and they're seeing that information again and again. So another idea that's tangentially related to this whole student of the week thing that you may or may not have seen before is, in a case where you might want to select or recognize a student of the week, and this is a slightly different context where the objective is to recognize somebody who's done exceptional work, or the star student, or the star employee. Another way to do this outside of the glossary is to create a special group within your course and just call that group Student of the Week or Star Student, whatever it is you'd like to call it. Put a special icon, like a star, or something like that, like they use in the Moodle.org forums, on that group. And then when you select the Student of the Week, you put that student in that group, make sure they're the only one in that group. And then anytime that student's posting to a discussion forum, or somebody goes to look at their profile, they've got that special designation. So everybody can see, like, that's the Student of the Week. And then you could also put their glossary entry on the course page as well, in a random glossary entry block. So it's another way to recognize your learners. So somebody, I think it was Richard, said he had done this. Oh, Dana has done this. So you did the teacher thing. Got it. Yeah, it's kind of fun. And it's funny because people will just log in and, you know, they'll go home and say, hey, you know, I'm the Student of the Week this week. Example number 3. Resource collection. And there are so many ways that you can do this. I'm going to start with the most basic. When I work with teachers and trainers, I often find that they have a collection of websites related to what they do or whatever it is they're teaching on or training on. And you know, in the old days, they'd take those lists of websites, they'd put it on a website or a web page, and then they'd have to figure out how to manage that. More often than not, we'd end up with this big, long, scrolling, ugly list of links with rough organization, very little description. It was hard for the learners to find what they needed to find, and if the list changed or moved, they were all messed up. You know, like their favorite game was link number 4, and yikes, you know, you just moved everything. So, and it was hairy for the teacher to maintain as well. So I love the glossary for this application. So I can create a glossary. I can create different categories in the glossary. So let's say I'm teaching elementary school. I could have a category for math websites. I could have a category for science websites, another one for reading websites. I could have I could have additional categories. You know, here are games. Here's some links for you know, flashcards, whatever you'd like to do there. Just like the others, you can allow the learners to add websites, which I like because the students always are right on top of things on what's out there. You can allow the learners to rate the websites, so they can say, this one rocks, this one's really good, and this one's, you know, a dead link, and when it's a dead link, you just delete it. I also like that you can have a full description of the website there. So I'm not just looking at a name. My learners aren't just looking at a name of a website and trying to guess what it is, but you can have a description and explain what the website's about. And then with that keyword functionality, you can also give other options for searching. So if it's, addition facts, you can have keywords that say addition facts. So set up categories, use ratings. I use allow learner contributions. Variations on this, I have tutorials. I can put those in a glossary as a resource collection. Concrete example here, when I worked as an instructional technology specialist, I'd write these awesome tutorials, how-tos, how to do things. The tough part was always finding the teacher, reaching the teacher at the moment they needed that support. If I tell you today, here's how you copy and paste, and you have no reason to be copying and pasting, that's not going to stick. But if I create a glossary that has all of these resources in it, and I connect this to a random glossary entry block, I have these tutorials popping up or these tips popping up every day, then hopefully at one point we'll match the tip with the moment of need, and everyone will be thrilled. The glossary can also be used to collect forms. So if you have documents and information and you need a way to compile those and make those available, the glossary will work for that. William Rice in his book suggested that the glossary could be used for a collection of mnemonics. So here's a way to remember 8 times 8. And then, like I said, this one just goes on and on. So backing through the chat here just a bit. So let's see, random is better. Teacher of the week. Glossary of Moodle videos from YouTube. Oh, good one. Here's another YouTube example for you. And one I wish I had thought to include here because I think it's such a cool idea, is a lot of times instructors will spend time looking for the perfect video to include in their courses, to include in their content. And my mantra always goes back to, how can I get the learners to do the work? As I think about that idea, I think, well, okay, so I can spend forever looking at multiple videos trying to find the best one. But if I turn that over to the learner and I make it a task for them, so I ask the learners, you go out and find me the best video you can that shows me how to, let's do, I'm going to say add fractions. You go out and find me the best video you can to show me how to add fractions. And then you ask the learners to go out, do that search, bring their videos back, put them in YouTube. With the new Moodle Media button in Moodle 2, this process has just gotten tons easier. So I can embed the video straight from the Moodle toolbar. I don't have to train the students on how to do all of that. And then you can allow the learners to rate each other's videos. So we've multiplied that task there because the students aren't just watching the one video that I think is good just once, if that. They are likely watching multiple videos. They're thinking about why this video is good, why this one's bad, and which one's best, and having to explain that, and then ideally looking at other students' videos. Because we all know, what works for me in terms of an explanation isn't necessarily going to work for the kid sitting next to me. So you have all of these different ways of attacking an issue or a problem, and all coming from the students. So Amir says he prefers the database for this. You can set up a form for them to fill in. Yeah, there are times where I like the database, and it depends on what my ultimate objective is. Pros and cons. Glossary I can set up in minutes, probably seconds. I can set it up really fast and get going right away. And there have been occasions where I've done that. I've needed that. The database, more functionality, but more complex. It takes more work for me to set that up, and even more work if I want to make it pretty. But I do have more control. So I can tell the learner, I want, here's a good example where I like to use the database, book reviews. In a book review, I want them to tell me the title, the author. I want them to write a summary of the book and probably upload a picture of the cover of the book. If I told my students to do that in a glossary, I would get some of that information, and it would be all over the place, and I might have to look for it. If I give them a database, I have those specific fields, very easy for the learner to see what it is they need to do and how to respond. So there are definite places where I like the database. As I think about it, one of the things that makes the glossary a big win for me over the database is that random glossary entry block. Because even like the websites or these resource collections, I may want to throw those in a random glossary entry block and make them more available for my students too. But definitely pros and cons on that. Benefits and drawbacks to using Glossary over database or wiki. I just talked about now the Glossary over the database. The wiki, I would say, is designed. I know I talked about the Glossary as being a collaborative content generation. The difference, though, is that in the Glossary, everyone still has control over their own entry. So there is a space, it is my content, nobody else is editing my content, but collectively we have this resource that we've created as a class. In a wiki, it's more about the end result, what's created, than who said it, where I say the Glossary goes the other direction. In the wiki, we're all working on a collective document. Maybe it's a collective definition. You could use it for the same sorts of examples, right? We could have a collective list of websites. We could have a list of mnemonics. We could have a study guide. We could write a report in the wiki. But in the wiki, we're all editing the exact same text to the exact same space. And the only sense of ownership that goes with that is back behind that history tab. So it's really about the end result, which for some learners is hard for them to get their mind around, is that you don't have to put your name next to everything you write, and you don't have to format your text in a different color. It's about the end result. Whereas the Glossary still is the students taking ownership over their individual contribution, and it's the collective set of resources. Hopefully that helps. So, and then Richard says, yeah, on the Glossary versus database, categories are a benefit. Yes. Database is searchable, and database has some nice searchable options too. And you can create categories by adding a category field. You can create keywords in the database by adding a keyword field. You can really, you could probably use the two, Glossary and database, pretty interchangeably. Pretty much any activity I describe here, I think you could do with the database. As I said, the one big difference would be the random Glossary entry block. There is not that same functionality for the database. That's a really good question. So, and ideally, my hope is at some point, the community kind of gets around the database and starts building some presets or templates that make the database a bit easier, because there is such a learning curve, especially to making pretty databases. It would, wouldn't it? Yeah. Next idea then, recipe of the day. Lots of variations here, but I was thinking about an example. I worked with a foreign language teacher, and we were working with RSS feeds at the time, but she found this website from which she could pull RSS feeds of recipes. So every day they would post a new recipe, and that would come up in the RSS feed. So I thought, well, you could build your own. If you would like to build your own, you have a collection of recipes. So each entry in the Glossary is its own recipe. You have different categories for the different recipe types. So whether it's desserts or sauce or soup or breakfast, pardon me just a second. And then you can connect that glossary to a random Glossary entry block so that every day you have a new recipe appearing. And there are several applications for this, right? If one of the other ideas I thought of is, let's say, I was working with a hospital recently, and they were wanting to deliver some outreach programs to their community. And a need in a lot of communities here in the US is diabetic support. So people who are diabetic need help figuring out what they can eat and finding recipes. So you could build a glossary of diabetic recipes and then have a new recipe pop up every day, and you could have that in the course with all of the different resources for diabetics, or for the community for diabetics. So that's another idea there. And then I would suggest having ratings on, so you can allow users to rate the recipes, come up with a cool rating scale for that, really yummy or would never touch that again kind of thing. Allow comments. I think that would be really useful here, because you can allow people to say, when you do this step, you might adjust it this way, or here's a correction. And then allow learner contributions. So in the foreign language class, you could have learners go out and try recipes, find recipes, and share those back. You could also do, again, a community kind of building thing. And phrase of the day, yes, yes. So other variations, quote of the day, phrase of the day, quote of the week. Goodness, anything you want to do every day, every week. Picture of the day. Code of the day, yes. Yeah, that's a good one. Moodle developers, yeah. Yeah, so it doesn't take too long here to come up with lots of variations that you could use to present this information. And again, for me, the real value here is the learner may not go check out the glossary itself, but if I can put it in that random glossary entry block, then I can have that appear on the front page and reach out and catch their attention. Next example, resource management. A couple varieties here as well. Resource management, what I'm thinking of, well, actually, I'm thinking of a very specific example, and I've seen this in several different situations. But I came across a forum thread back, oh goodness, it was posted quite some time ago, 2005, I think, maybe. Joseph Rizzo, I'm going to mispronounce his last name, but Joseph did this whole post on how to use the glossary keywords for language correction, and there's a link in the session course that points to that whole thread. But the idea being that if you are a language instructor, whether you're teaching English or you're teaching a foreign language, that you would, as you look at your learners write in their forum posts or in the wiki, wherever they're writing, you identify, there are common errors. And if you've been teaching long or training long, you can identify those, and this applies across all fields. You can identify those common errors. So the idea here is that you put the common errors in as keywords in these glossary entries, and the glossary entry itself contains the tip or the error correction. So in his example, it would contain the grammatical tip. So if there's some confusion over the spellings of there, T-H-E-Y apostrophe R-E and T-H-E-I-R, you could have, the grammatical tip cover how to deal with that, and then your keywords would cover some variations so that the auto linking picks that up. So the way this works, learner writes something incorrectly, and it matches one of the keyword variations that the instructor has devised, and then it gives them an option. They click on that link and they go, oh yeah, okay, so that's the error I'm looking at. This is what I should have done instead. So you might think about this one as putting the glossary itself in an orphaned topic. So you put it off the bottom of the course page so the learners don't see the glossary. I think that's totally up to you, really. It depends on whether or not you want the learners to see that whole collective glossary, and if you want them browsing through that whole glossary, if there's value in that, if it might be nicer to just have that resource available at the moment they need it. Yeah, like spell check, but customized. You get it. That's exactly it. I encourage you on this one to read his forum post because he explains it really nicely. Hopefully I can do a better job of explaining these other examples. But so yeah, think about it in an orphan topic. Depends on what's in that glossary. And your auto linking must be on for this to work. And you've got to make sure that you're linking those keywords. Here's another example. Thinking about processes or content. If I am working through, let me go back to teaching middle school math. There are certain skills that my learners would tend to forget. How to add and subtract positive and negative numbers, or how to add fractions. And maybe in a lesson or in a discussion forum or someplace I reference, to do this, you're going to do this more advanced skill, you'll need to add the fractions. And I could have the concept of adding fractions, I could have a video about adding fractions in that glossary, so that any time in the course I need to pull that up for a learner, or the learner needs to pull that up, it's right there at their fingertips just in time. Dana, if you go into the course for this session that you use to link to this, the Adobe Connect session, scroll down the page just a bit, and the topic that talks about resource management, there is a link to his forum post there. You're welcome. Yeah, and then people responded with 1 or 2 variations on that idea too. So, and I know we also used it for a time. We were looking for a way to manage, I'm trying to remember, I think it was transcripts or videos for some of our online courses, like video transcripts. And the glossary became a really nice way to manage that because of the way things popped up in a new window and had the auto link, and then I could have that transcript available wherever I needed it. So it can be a really kind of clever way to manage some resources and make those available throughout the course. Next idea, using the glossary to contain tips and tricks. And this one came from, oh my goodness, I forgot to put her name on there. I want to say Leanne. I might have the wrong name there. The course references, who came up with this idea. But she suggested that in their courses where they were training new employees, they asked existing employees to build a glossary of tips and tricks. You know, things I wish I knew, things I wish I had learned when I started my job. You know, tips to help you manage in this company, tricks to save you time and effort. You could have different categories related to different job tasks. So if people wanted to go through and browse those tips and tricks, they could. You could have ratings on so people could rate the most useful tips. So a new employee could come in and say, oh yeah, that one saved me a ton of time. Or an existing employee could say, yeah, I really wish I would have known that one. You could have comments on to allow people to add additions or clarification. You might think about the random glossary entry block. It could make a nice addition to the new employee training course. And then what I think is really useful about this whole idea is that, you know, for one, the employees that are adding entries to the glossary, we're causing them to review and reflect about what they know and how they do their job, which can be useful on one level. And then at another level, the people who are developing training or training new employees can look at the tips and tricks that are in that glossary and use that to think about how they need to revise what they're doing and how they can improve what they're doing so that those tips and tricks are just commonplace as part of the training. So slight variations on this, what I wish I knew. You could use that in lots of different contexts. You could also do a common errors thing, and this came from William Rice's book. You know, if you're teaching, we'll go back to the other example, the code development. There are common software bugs or common bugs that you might run into when you're developing Moodle blocks or Moodle features, or you're doing coding, or common errors, you know, in any sort of process or procedure or practice. You could put all of those into a glossary. And again, part of the value here is letting the learner make those contributions and having them add to that. Next one, this one comes from Diana Martinez, and she posted this in the discussion forums at moodle.org as well. Her idea here is to use the glossary to do a test review. So she had her students, when it was about time to take a test, come into class. They would draw a content area or a test objective from a hat as they walk in the door. And then they would work in groups. The students would work in groups to write as much as they could, gather as much information as they could in a period of 15 minutes, put it in the glossary, and then, you know, that was part of their process for reviewing the content. That information, you know, they've got a good review of the information that they had to write about, and then they have all of the other information from all the other students available in that glossary so they can go back and review that way. So in here, I would do categories related to the different objectives or the different topics that the students are reviewing. You could have ratings here to let students rate the quality of the content. Because, you know, in some cases, some students will look at that content and go, you know, that's not quite right. Or, you know, we really need more information here for this to be useful for us. You could use a rating scale to let the students give that sort of feedback to even grade the other groups. You could have comments on, again, to allow for additions or clarification. So nice ways to do this. I'm looking back at the discussion. Might be useful if we could add it to the themes forum, auto linking, highlight directly. Oh, that's a good idea. So themes forum, oh, that's a really cool idea. Waiting to see what Mary says. Yes, they can also include multimedia presentations. So here's some alternatives to the whole test review idea. Is think about the glossary just as an alternative for projects. In a lot of cases, students are writing reports, developing PowerPoint presentations, maybe they're making videos. Let's kick that up a notch and then have them do like a full encyclopedia-like entry in their glossary and make that their project. So the value I see there is that you're not the only audience. When they turn that paper into you, you're the only one that sees it. You're the only one that benefits, and the students know that when they're writing these things. If you have them present to an audience, it makes it more authentic, makes it more motivating, more challenging for them. So think about the glossary in the same sort of context for writing reports. If you are working in a training environment or a business environment, you could also have learners create content or do content generation for training materials this way. In my experience, a lot of the training that's done within an organization is of the, we need to document that they know this kind of thing. It's not, there's a lot of that sort of training that happens. So rather than having learners take the same multiple choice test over and over again, could you let them address a question or a topic or help you create content for new employees using the glossary? And the glossary is just one option, but it would let them do small chunks of content rather than trying to write entire lessons. Debate topics. This idea I thought was really cool. Ryan Chadwick came up with this idea and he posted it in the Moodle discussion forum. I have a link there in that course for that. So presumably Ryan Chadwick is a debate instructor or works with debate instructors. And so in his glossary, he has a glossary set up of sample debate topics. So each entry in the glossary is a sample debate topic. And you could have categories in that glossary related to different types of topics if you wanted. But the power here is that he puts those debate topics in a random glossary entry block. And then on the days that they want to practice, thinking on their feet, he'll have a laptop set up at the front of the room. The students will reload the page, and on that page reload, a new debate topic pops up in the random glossary entry block. And the students at that moment have to speak on that topic. So it's the equivalent of drawing a name from a hat, right? Or equivalent of drawing a topic from a hat. But it's, computer generated and kind of